Okay, Chair Micklek, we are live.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'd like to call this Committee of the Whole meeting of February 1st, 2021 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Mike Mcpherson, Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. We are meeting electronically through Zoom during this declared state of emergency. Members of the public may observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast on our YouTube channel. I'm going to do a roll call. I will ask the town clerk to complete a roll call of council so that we can confirm. Julie, go ahead.
Thank you. Mary Easton?
Present.
Councillor Regima?
Present.
Councillor Russell?
Here.
Councillor Brunet?
Here.
Councillor Pachariva?
Present.
Councillor Mcpherson?
Here.
Councillor Micklek?
Here.
Councillor Timmers?
Here.
And Councillor Reimer?
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
Perfect. In addition, I want to take a moment to welcome the staff we have joining us today electronically. Chief Administrative Officer Mike Kirkopoulos, Director of Finance, Administration and Innovation Lawrence Wagner, Associate Director of Finance Terry Chawala, Director of Planning and Development Kathleen Dale, Associate Director of Planning and Development Matt Bruder, Manager of Planning and Development Monica Kokiara, Manager of Municipal Law Enforcement Mike Barkway, Director of Public Works David Graham, Manager of Engineering Services Walter Neubauer, Director of Community Services Shannon McKay, Associate Director Recreation and Culture Sarah Ain, Jessica Wilson, Cultural Development Coordinator, Jasmine Proteau, Cultural Development Coordinator, Fire Chief Greg Hudson, Director of Development and Communications Paul Deaney, CEO Lincoln Public Library Julie Andrews, Legislative and Committee Coordinator Aaron Plant, IT staff are also in attendance, and moderating and clerking today's meeting, we have our town clerk, Julie Kirkelos. Others in attendance are registered delegations, and they will be brought in to the meeting when council reaches that agenda item in the meeting. As this is a virtual meeting, I will ask that we follow some procedures during this electronic meeting. Should there be a connection or service disruption for the chair, or if quorum is lost, the chair and or clerk will call a 10-minute recess to reconnect and regain quorum. If quorum is lost, the meeting will be adjourned. If connection is lost from the chair, the clerk will ask those in attendance to wait up to 10 minutes to provide the chair time to reconnect and resume the meeting. Otherwise, after that time frame, the vice chair will resume the meeting until the chair has reconnected and resumes their role. Each member of council who wishes to speak, press the raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk will track our speakers list today and then invite you to speak when I open it up for comments or questions. Also, when I finish reading a motion and announcing the mover, the clerk will then call out the vote by reading each council member's name out loud. Please remember to take yourselves off mute during this portion of the meeting so that you can confirm if you support or oppose. Also, when not speaking, please remember to put yourselves on mute. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening?
So Chair Micklek, we have hands up from Councillor Regima and Councillor Reimer.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Regima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm declaring an interest in agenda item 5.3.3 being report PD-0801 and its zoning bylaw amendment by Vineland Growers Cooperative Limited, as the applicant is a client of my employer, NPG Planning Solutions. Thank you.
Councillor Reimer, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Micklek.
Item 6.3.1 FN-02-21, the applicant for the drainage loan is a customer of the company I work for. And item 5.33 PD-08-21, zoning bylaw amendment by Vineland growers. The members of the co-op are customers of the company I work for.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reimer. And myself, I have a conflict with item 7.3.4 PW-01-21 regarding the Jordan Village Improvement Plan budget update. I own property, both residential and investment in nature in that described area. Okay, so for statutory public meetings, we have no public meetings this evening. The Planning and Economic Development Agenda portion of this meeting. 5.1 delegations. We are now at the delegations portion of the Planning and Economic Committee meeting agenda. Please note that each delegation may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Tonight's agenda, there's quite a bit on this agenda, and we do have quite a number of speakers. So I'm going to respectfully ask that we keep to that 5 minutes. And if I do give you a heads up to, move on or wrap it up, don't take any offense to that. It's all in an effort to keep the meeting going. Once we have received the delegation for a report, committee will transition directly to the report and motion. Our first delegation is Stephanie Day speaking to report PD-02-21, review of muzzle order. Stephanie, please, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First off, thank you so much once again for your time and consideration into this matter. I was very pleased reading the report to see that there's support from the council for further consideration on amending the muzzle order against Dozer, especially to make changes to give him more freedom while he's at home. I am a little disappointed, however, that the SPCA will not take further consideration into the changes in his circumstance and the change in his behavior since. While I understand that there might not be a set test to determine whether a dog may reoffend, it's hard for me to understand how they can issue these orders, affecting the lives of dogs forever without having any means of follow-up or even providing recommendation for rehabilitation. I feel that if they had further involvement in investigating the situations in their entirety, they'd be able to provide more reason to yourselves as to why specific animals should be kept under stricter conditions or not, rather than simply issuing the orders with no means of rectification. I work in the criminal justice system, and one of our main goals is always on rehabilitation of the offender. And I really believe that animals should be given the same respect and empathy, if not more. This would certainly change the life of many animals forever, giving enhanced protection to the community at the same time. And I also feel that if they were able to take more of a role in this situation, that it would be clear that in Dozer's case, a muzzle is not necessarily required. I did have the opportunity to read Ms. Belford's statement for the first time over the weekend, and while I'm certainly sympathetic to her opinion on the matter, I think there are many factors outlined in her report that should be taken into consideration. Really important to note is that the incident did take place outside of 5026 Chestnut Court, which was Dozer's former owner, Sarah and Charles Young's residence. So Dozer and the family, their young children and a neighbor were heading back from a park across the way, and Miss Belford was picking up an item on their porch. So he most certainly would have perceived her as a threat, not knowing who this person was. But at the same time, the handler should have also recognized any apprehension in him or changes in his demeanor before deciding to approach her. This brings me to the fact that he was not under the care of his owners at the time of the incident, but instead that of a neighbor. And we have no idea if she was competent to handle Dozer. There's also a mention that his collar broke suddenly at the time. So we have no idea what really led to the situation of the faulty equipment. Particular interest on this point is that the SPCA report suggested it was the leash, whereas the other report suggested the collar. So I don't think there was really a full investigation into the matter. And also I find important that right after the incident, Dozer was put into the home with the small children and left alone while Sarah and Dee attended to Miss Belford. And they certainly wouldn't have done this if they thought he was a risk at all or in any way a dangerous animal. He's not dangerous naturally, but instead was put in a position where he would have felt the need to protect his family. And even though this is definitely not right, it is definitely the owner's role to demonstrate that they're the pack leader in a sense, and that they're responsible to handle any perceived danger. It should have been enforced more before the incident, but Dozer was also a very young pup at the time, only about 6 months. He'd grown very large, so he was still learning his training and also learning how strong he had gotten at the time. So it's just heartbreaking for me to know that, in my opinion, the previous owner's negligence led to the situation and that he has to face consequences for the remainder of his life because of this. And then rather than helping him after the incident, the previous owners became fearful of him. They immediately began searching for a new home instead of working on training. They also forced him to wear a spiked lock collar, which I removed the day I got him. But that certainly would have not only caused him harm while in their care, but also increased anxiety. And he was a very anxious dog when he got to my home, which in my opinion was due to their lack of proper care in the situation, especially after the incident per se. He's a completely different animal now, no longer anxious, but instead curious and excited as the young pup should be. And he simply needed the proper structure, a lot of attention, and a loving environment. So for the council's knowledge, I am Dozer's sole owner. I'm the only one that handles him when we're off the property. And I'm also sure to check his equipment regularly, his leash, his muzzle, his collar, not only for public safety, but also for his own safety. There's been no incidents since Dozer's been in my care. And he's met family members and close friends over the past few months and is just very excited and wants nothing more to make new friends. So Dozer's responded extremely well to the in-home training that we've done to date, and we will definitely continue that. I certainly understand council's apprehension, not knowing him yourselves, obviously, and your concern for the public safety. So I'm definitely open to registering for any public training courses. COVID's made this a little more difficult, and I'm also hoping for your input as to what programming specifically would meet your eligibility requirements. So those are things I'm hoping to find out more today. So thank you all again, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Just got in there in the 5-minute mark. I'm impressed. Perfect. Are there any questions from members of council for Ms. Day?
We have a question, Chair Miclick, Councillor Russell.
Councillor Russell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a short question to Ms. Day, maybe a secondary question to Mr. Barkway. Stephanie, again, thanks for coming again and coming back and sharing your story with us and that of Dozer. Can you just confirm how old Dozer is at this point? Is he about 2?
So we just turned 1 on November 7th. So he's about 14 months at this time, almost.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie.
Just over 8.
And follow up, Councillor Miclick, or Mr. Chair, to Mr. Barkway. Looking at your the 3 recommendations you have in your conclusion of this document, I'm wondering if there's not, again, at least maybe open for a 4th of, again, allowing, we're kind of giving a little bit of leniency at the time, but is there a possibility to revisit this in another year's time or 6 months as the dog matures and grows a little, just to find out whether or not anything's changed in that time frame, to maybe again go away from the order to muzzle?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. There is nothing specifically written in regards to re-examination at a further date that I'm aware of, and just piggybacking on what the SPCA officers have explained to me when I spoke with them and clarifying, there's no true test to determine the obedience or lack of obedience or the possibility of this incident or another incident happening. So a reoccurrence can never be ruled 100% out. I believe it was Officer Herman that expressed to me that there is a possibility of rehabilitation, but it depends. It's always majorly dependent on the training that's done and the adherence to the training and the follow-up by the handler or the owner continually daily moving forward from that. So to revisit something at a later time, I'm not sure the procedurally how that would take place at this point. But it is something that I guess council can add to. The examples I gave about the possibilities under option number 1 are not limited to, but I suggested some that would be the most appropriate at the time. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barkway.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Who do we have next?
We have Councillor Mcpherson.
Councillor Mcpherson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a quick question through to Stephanie. Stephanie, did you consider when you got Dozier to take him to professional training?
I did. I did get him shortly after the COVID pandemic had started. So that certainly did pose some issues. I also waited to speak to the vet about their recommendations for training. And they did actually recommend a couple in the local area that were there. Financial is a different situation as well. A lot of the programming specifically for dogs with previous aggression behaviors or previous incidents are more costly than regular programming. So with the holidays and everything, that was something that was a little more difficult. So because he responded well to the in-house training, I've kept with that and waited your opinions on the matter, but it's something definitely I can look into and take more proactive steps towards.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Mr. Chair, I'll save my other question for the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, Ms. Kerberos?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Day. Our second delegation is Caitlin Whiteley and Ryan Horman on behalf of Niagara SPCA speaking to PD-02-21 review of muzzle order -day. Caitlin and Ryan, please go ahead. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us, and good evening, everybody. So just to touch base a little bit on some of the things that Ms. Day had said, is that appropriate to do at this point here? Just to touch on a few points that she had mentioned of concern.
Feel free.
Okay, so her question about as to why the SPCA doesn't follow up. So we investigate matters of dog bites and attacks, and we gather the totality of the evidence and we base the order on that. Any follow-up that's done or any modification that's done is through the process that we're doing right now, as outlined in the Municipal Act. So it wouldn't be so much of a follow-up on our end as what we're going through right now with the appeal process. I mean, we've noted that there are no follow-up biting incidences on Miss Day's dog. So further to any questions about the report, or does anybody have any questions for us?
Well, traditionally, you would make your comments, say your piece, and then we would ask you questions, but we can open up the questioning right now. Do any members of council have questions for either Ryan or Caitlin? Ms. Kerberos?
We have Councillor Timmers up first.
Councillor Timmers?
Thank you very much, through you, Chair, to Mr. Herman. Thank you for being here tonight, and I'm in support of option number 1 that's being recommended. I guess my only question would be, it's a young dog, and I think he had a bad start. So 3 or 4 years from now, and there's been absolutely no incidents whatsoever, can the muzzle order be removed at that time? Can we revisit that? That's my only question for you, because it seems to have a life sentence. This dog may never ever offend for the rest of his life. So is there something we can do with that?
I'm going to echo what Mike Barkway had said, and that there's procedurally not sure how that would work. The appeal process is set out through the Municipal Act. which allows for 3 options to modify, revoke, or uphold. As far as looking at this issue again as an appeal down the road, I think that's something that that would be better spoken to by Mike.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next. Ms. Griffin.
Councillor Regima.
Councillor Ringiama, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I read through all of the information that we were provided with, and I'm completely, comfortable with the idea that this dog is now with somebody who's passionate about making sure that the dog's going to have a good future, and that Miss Day is responsible and dedicated dog owner. But this is serious, that somebody was bitten, and we have to take it seriously. And we don't, none of us knows whether this dog is going to always be with Miss Day. That's a bit of a stretch, but we have to make sure that the dog, that this is taken seriously and that we make the right decision. So I'm in favor of the option number 1 that was proposed, sort of a, that Miss Day not have to post a sign on her property, and that the dog not have to be on a short leash at all times when off the property. But my question is, so the question we heard earlier is this able to be reviewed in the future? If the outcome is that Dozer's future is stable and Dozer doesn't reoffend at any time in the future, can't be revisited. My question is I want to know that, but I also want to know the opposite, and that is what follow-up is there to ensure that Dozer does continue to wear a muzzle, and that the training is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair.
Thank you. Please answer, but I'm going to mention to members of council that we're going to be discussing the report itself in a little bit. If we could just please direct our questions to Caitlin and Ryan for their professional opinions regarding their thoughts. So go ahead. Sorry to interrupt there.
Certainly. So through you, Chair, enforcement of the order is done by complaint. So the onus to comply with the order falls on Ms. Day. So it's her responsibility to ensure that she complies with the sections that are currently in place. And then it's her responsibility to ensure that she complies with the new sections if the order is modified. So as far as enforcement goes, it'd be complaint driven only. If we receive a complaint that Miss Day is walking Dozer without a muzzle, that's when enforcement would take place. Or if another biting or attack incident had occurred, then that's when enforcement would take place for a violation of the order.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Next, we have
Councillor Mcpherson.
Councillor Mcpherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the delegation, just a quick question. So does the SPCA, are you approachable by a dog owner to recommend a trainer? Is there professional trainers that you would recommend? These are the 3 as from what we've dealt with in the past, these are the 3, these are the 5 that we would recommend. Does that happen?
Through you, Chair, absolutely, yes. If that is the route that Ms. Day, or if that's the route that council decides tonight to modify the order and say that, we can definitely recommend certified trainers. We can't, so to speak, steer to any particular training, for instance.
Right.
If a person has a like a certificate or a degree in a certified dog behaviorist, that would suffice as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have.
We do not.
Oh, all right. A question I would have, thank you very much for coming. A question I would have is, there was a muzzle order placed at a young age for this puppy or for this dog. What happens the next time? What does the severity or the possibility of a removal of a muzzle order become more difficult or more challenging should this dog reoffend again?
It's difficult to say. So if the order was revoked tonight, and we received another report about a biting incident on this dog, we would issue another order, in addition to potential fines or a Part 3 summons for allowing the dog to bite, chase, attack, whatever the circumstances may warrant. So in short, we would just reissue another order.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So I see no other hands, no other questions. Thank you very much, Ryan, for coming. There being no further questions of the delegations, we now consider the item 5.3.1 report PD-02-21 review of muzzle order date. Do members of council have questions at this time regarding the report itself? How we proceed moving forward with the recommendations?
First up, we have Councillor Mcpherson to speak.
Councillor Mcpherson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to now go down the road that I think Councillor Regima and Councillor Timbers were going down. And I too agree that that we are dealing with what was a very, very young dog, a dog of 6 months old, and had some challenging issues in that first 6 months of the dog's life. I am a believer in dogs can be trained and they can be rehabilitated. And I would move that we consider formal professional training as recommended by the SPCA to be a qualifier, if you will, to then remove the muzzle order. So that once this training is completed, that the muzzle order is taken off the dog, and we would expect that the trainer would supply obviously a certificate and a letter of recommendation that the dog has completed the training and gone through all the socialization that happens and the behavioral training, so that we come out of that with some assurances, and there's never guarantees, we know that, but some assurances that the dog has gone through formal professional training. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mcpherson. Do any other members have questions, concerns? Yeah, Councillor Mcpherson, go ahead. Is your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I was just unmuting. I appreciate, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Councillor Mcpherson's comments, and I see the validity and making sure that the dog goes through successful completion of a professional training course. But I don't know enough about that to know whether this training course could happen in a month and a half, and then we're looking at removing a muzzle order of a dog that's really still quite young, and we really don't see an established pattern. So I like the idea of looking at this, but I would want to see it down the road a bit, so we can look back and say it's been, whatever an appropriate period of time is, and the dog hasn't reoffended. So now I'm comfortable knowing that, and knowing that the dog's had training. And I'm no means an expert, so I wouldn't know what period of time that would be. But I think I'd like to see a pattern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's kind of a question I was thinking too, and I was alluding to, like, this is a choice that the owner of the dog is making in asking for the removal of this order, and timing is not up to us to determine as far as the request. It's up to us to determine the decision that we make. Mary Easton, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think there are many things about this situation that are warranted in terms of the emotion around them. However, I do believe that the expertise that's required to make the judgments are not within our purview. We have information as a quasi-judicial board in order to hear this hearing, and we base our judgments on the expertise by the experts, and they have done that. And so I will be following the judgment and the recommendations of the expert that have been called upon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Easton? Do we have any more hands up?
We do not, Chair Miclick.
Okay, perfect. No, so.
We do. Councillor Mcpherson has put his hand back up.
Councillor Mcpherson, go ahead.
So Mr. Chair, I did bring a move there, or I guess it was a move that we consider. So I think we would need to put that out to a vote.
Is that an amendment, Councillor?
Yes, I guess it would be an amendment that we not leave the muzzle order in there forever and ever, amen, and that we consider that after, and I have no issue with Councillor Rajima's suggestion that it be a period of time and a professional training session, that we lift the muzzle order. And I'm ready for that to go to vote.
Well, before we do that, can we just get Mike Barkway to weigh in on that, as I think there is some concern with what is the revisit look like? What does that look like for staff or SPCA or the individual who owns the particular animal? Mike, sorry, Chair Miclick, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Mr. Barkway. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I've read through the bylaw, and I was looking in regards to any revisiting. There's nothing that states that. It also doesn't say there's a limit to the amount of times a dog owner can make an appeal. There's no indication of that at all. I would suggest that if there is a period of time that's wanted to put over to have training done, that does follow recommendation number one, or option number one, other than some of the notes from the order are still staying in place. I don't know if at this point it would be best to leave the order in place and have the training completed, and then possibly request that a second appeal take place with some sort of documentation showing that, or whether you would prefer to, I don't know procedurally how this would work with the report that's here in the recommendation, but something that can be put off until training is done. But from what I see within the bylaw itself, the Liability Act, I do not see that there's any limitation to the amount of times it can be reviewed.
Thank you very much. I just want to provide a quick comment. Like, when I'm looking at this, and maybe this can go to Mr. Barkway as well. Like, when I'm looking at this, and there's an exempt the owner in part form, the notice, subject to such condition as council considered appropriate. Examples include, however, are not limited to. So these conditions are already listed. Do we just say condition A, condition B, C, D? We, are we clearly defining that in this? Or are we just including examples? And I'm asking Mr. Buckway.
Thank you, Chair. For option number one.
For option number one.
For option one, it's a partial exemption. So some of those conditions of the order would remain in place, even with proof that training is done. So what I've done is listed in the option of having the owner provide documentation of the completion of professional training, and then showing that there are still conditions that remain within the order. So it's removed the order, it's removed the section that states that the dog has to be in a muzzle even while it's on its own property. But there's no more dangerous sign that needs to be posted. And the dog doesn't have to be a muzzle as long as it's within a fenced compound within the owner's property. So this is like a partial exemption of the muzzle order. It's not a complete exemption. If you want to do a complete exemption, I didn't have any conditions listed to it. It was just to exempt the order.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Mcpherson, sorry about that. You wish to continue? Do you have a further question?
No, I would just say that the part of that number one for me is the continued muzzle while not on the property. That's the part that I'm attempting to have eliminated after a period of time and after some professional training. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We have Councillor Timmers next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've made, there's some good concessions made here. Dozer doesn't have to wear a muzzle when he's at home in his backyard. There's no requirement for the sign, which I think is just setting him up to fail with a sign and bringing, very negative attention. So that's great. I'm happy to see that. My comment was if we need to make an amendment with the opportunity for an appeal, but it doesn't seem that that's necessary because, as Mr. Barkway just said, that's open. So I would encourage Stephanie to bring back an appeal maybe down the road once Dozer's had his training and a little bit of time has gone by and he's now a fully adult dog, and perhaps appeal again. Those are my comments, but I'm supporting option one.
Thank you very much.
So Chair Micklek, at this time, Councillor Mcpherson has put forward an amendment, and I believe Councillor Mcpherson, it was to remove section B of option one, if I'm hearing you correctly. If not, please clarify, and we can vote on that amendment to remove option one, subsection B.
Remove subsection B.
Option one, section B.
Okay, remove section.
And that would
okay.
be to speak to Councillor Mcpherson's amendment was to remove the muzzle while off the property.
Okay, so this is a motion moved by Councillor Mcpherson, so it would not necessarily be, this isn't a friendly amendment, it's just an amendment. It's an amendment, it's just.
It would be to strike it out. It would be to
Okay.
strike out that. We can vote on that amendment to strike it out, and
Okay.
then we can move, if that passes, then we move the main motion without section B. Does that make sense?
It's making sense now.
Okay, good.
What about members of council? Councillor Russell, go ahead. I see
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, just for clarification. So again, subsection A would have to preclude us removing subsection B. Like we would want, by removing subsection B, that means the muzzle can come off. But does subsection A not have to be completed first? Just a clarification.
I can defer that. I can pass that to Mr. Barkway.
Thank you, Chair. If I'm understanding this correctly, I think what you may want to do then is go with the removal of the muzzle order option, which I believe is down near the bottom of the report. There's three options. The three options are listed. I think you would go with the complete removal of the muzzle option, but have an amendment to that one and say that prior to that, there's proof of or documentation of the successful completion of professional certified dog training, preferably designed or tailored for aggressive dogs.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Barkway. I agree.
Mr. Bruder, oh, you had your hand up, but.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm good. I think Mr. Barkway just captured it properly.
Okay, fantastic. Councillor Russell, you're good? Okay.
So we still have Councillor Mcpherson's amendment.
So, Mr. Chair, just so we are crystal clear, my amendment, my friendly amendment is to remove the muzzle while not on the property. I am still supportive of professional certified dog training. I'm supportive of a tethered leash. So my only suggestion is the removal of the muzzle while away from the property. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
While, just to clarify, while away or within the confines of the property owner?
Well, within the confines is a recommendation. I'm in agreement that they not be muzzled there. Now, yeah. I think the muzzle should be 100% not muzzled. That's what my recommendation. After we have professional training, if we want to add a period of 6 months into this amendment, we can do that. But right now, I'm putting it on the table to have this item B, where the owner muzzle the dog while off their property, removed.
Okay. Oh, wow. Councillor Rinjama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to speak to it before it goes to a vote, because I understand where Councillor Mcpherson is going, and I appreciate that. But I think that that Miss Day has the options available to her to have the training done and then to come back. And we've heard that we've heard that there's nothing prohibiting her from coming back and reappealing, if you will. So I think that the options are there for her, and I'm comfortable with it, and I'm not comfortable with removing the muzzle order as it is at this time. So thank you for letting me speak again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, Ms. Kirklows, do we want to review that and then go to a vote on that amendment, friendly amendment?
Well, it's not a friendly amendment. It's still an amendment. So it's still to strike out section B, but keep everything else as Councillor Mcpherson has stated. So I'm going to call the vote. We have it moved by Councillor Mcpherson. So Councillor Brunet?
No.
Councillor Mcpherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miclick?
No.
Councillor Pachariva?
No.
Councillor Reimer?
No.
Councillor Rajima?
No.
Councillor Russell?
No.
Councillor Timmers?
No.
Mayor Easton?
No.
And so that fails. And so we're back to the main motion.
Okay. So we're back to the main motion. I see Councillor Rinjama, your hand is up again. Do you have something further? Okay, no. Thank you. So should we call a vote?
Yeah.
All right.
And so it was as stated, and it's moved by Councillor Mcpherson. Councillor Brunet?
Do you want me to read? Would you like me to read the?
Go for it.
Okay, it's a long one. Council received report PD-02-21 regarding a review of muzzle order day. Council exempt the order in part from the notice of order to muzzle of the Niagara SPCA and Humane Society, subject to such conditions. A, the owner of the dog shall provide documentation of successful completion of professional certified dog training, preferably designed, tailored for aggressive dogs, certificate and/or letter from certified trainer or facility. B, the owner of the dog shall at all times while the dog is not in the owner's dwelling unit or is not within the boundaries of the owner's premises bordered by an appropriate fenced enclosure for the species and size of the dog, ensure that the dog wears a muzzle in accordance with section 4.10 modified as condition of bylaw number 2019-18. C, removal of subsection A and C of section 1 of the notice of order to muzzle relating to tethering while on owner's property and signage posted of dangerous dog. D, retain subsection B and C of section 2 of the notice of order to muzzle relating to being under the control of a competent person 18 years of age and on a leash that does not exceed 2 meters in length. I will now ask the clerk to call the vote.
Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
No.
Councillor Miclick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Support.
That carries.
Okay, that was quite a discussion on that one, on the muzzle. Moving on, our third delegation is John Arians and Julia Redfern,
The other ones in.
IBI Group, speaking to PD-06-21, zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan, vacant land condominium.
Who's on this one?
John, Julia, please go ahead. Welcome tonight. Do we have John and Julia with us?
We're just bringing John Arians in.
Okay.
And Julia.
Good evening, members of council. I trust you can hear me okay.
Welcome, John. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you.
Just a friendly reminder of the 5-minute.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Easton, members of council. I know that our clients, John and Joanna, are with us this evening as well. I'm wondering if they need to be added to the meeting or not, but John texted me to say he was still in the waiting room. Regardless, we're here before you today on a very neat little infill project on King Street, which basically will complete the Cherry Heights subdivision that has been such a phenomenal success in Beamsville. We were before you earlier last year with a public meeting, and really the only concerns affecting this application were heritage related. Since that time, our staff have done a tremendous job working with your staff and our heritage consultant to deal with the heritage issues facing this property. I think we can all agree that the 4 townhouses fronting on Fraccione Street in the back are not creating any issues. It's really the facade of the townhouses along King Street that caused the concern. We do have a PowerPoint presentation, and Julia will be able to lead you through it, and both Julia and myself will be available to answer any questions that you may have. So I'll turn it over to Julia at this time then.
Monica, did you want to share the PowerPoint presentation? Thank you. So the subject lands are municipally known as 4918 and 4922 King Street. They have a combined lot area of 0.7 hectares and are located on the south side of King Street between Academy Street and Petty's Lane. Currently, the subject lands consist of a building known as the Woodburn Cottage, which is being used as a temporary office for the adjacent Cherry Heights subdivision. The Woodburn Cottage is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and was constructed as a single detached dwelling. In regard to the surrounding land uses, there are existing low-density single detached dwellings to the north, east, and west. To the south of the subject lands is the Cherry Heights subdivision, where medium-density townhouses have been constructed adjacent to the subject lands. Next slide. The west portion of the subject lands are proposed to be redeveloped with 3 street townhouse dwellings consisting of 4 units each, totaling 12 new units. The townhouse block on the south is proposed to function as part of the adjacent Cherry Heights subdivision, fronting onto Fraccioni Drive, whereas the remaining 8 townhouse units will have access onto a private road that is connecting to King Street. The Woodburn Cottage is proposed to be well preserved and accessed by a new gravel parking lot on the northeast portion of the subject lands. Next slide. The Woodburn Cottage was built in 1834. The main house facing the street is an elegant red brick Regency cottage with a hip roof. The rear 2-story addition, also of red brick, was established approximately 10 years later and has a gable roof. The building has design value because it is rare, unique, and represents the Regency style. Further, it displays a high degree of craftsmanship and artistic value. The designation bylaw designates the property as being a structure of architectural and historical value or interest, and states that the reason for the designation is that the dwelling is historically associated with prominent members of the community and believed to be the first brick home in the village. Also, this bylaw discusses architectural features such as the front facade features, the hipped roof, and interior architectural design. Next slide. As a result of comments received during the statutory public meeting, we revised the elevations to further make an effort on sympathizing with the important character and elements of the existing Woodburn Cottage. The revised elevations use a likeness of materials and warmth of color. There continues to be a primary entrance and windows facing King Street to ensure that the design integrates well within the streetscape. Next slide. Here you'll see the proposed revised elevation from the new private road. Carefully designed landscaping along the new road and around the new parking area will ensure that the sense of continuous landscape setting is retained. Clearing of dead and dying greenery along King Street and new plantings will also improve views and vistas to and from the site while enhancing the picturesque setting. These landscaping details will be further refined during the detailed design stage of the planning process. Next slide. Overall, we believe the proposed development is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, Region of Niagara official plan, Town of Lincoln official plan, and the proposed development demonstrates compatibility through building design, is supportable from a heritage, traffic, parking, servicing, and vegetation management perspective, and represents good planning and is in the public interest. Next slide. Thank you.
So those are our comments. We'd like to thank staff for their positive staff report, and Julie and I are available to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Julie and John. We also have with us John Fraccioni. I believe he's the owner of this property. Thank you. Welcome, John. Members of council, do any members of council have any questions to one of the presenters? And if you direct it specifically, if possible. Julie? No?
We have Mary Easton up.
Madam
Mary
Chair,
Easton?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to check that I can ask questions about the renderings that were part of the report. Is that?
I believe you can. There was pictures, there was drawings, there was images. I think that Mr. Arians and
yeah, of course.
Redfern would be more than happy to answer those questions. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Arians, very good to see you again. Thank you and Julia for coming. This is quite given the direction that council made at the public meeting that we had several weeks ago, this is quite an exciting proposal that has come forward. And so I just want to make sure, I had asked a question at that public meeting about the whether or not the front door to the building would be a working door. So I'm not going to make any assumptions, so I'm going to ask you the question. That's a working front door. That house and that entire house is not a facade facing the street, but an active home.
So Mayor Easton, you're absolutely correct. That was an issue that was raised, and we can confirm that it is an active front door facing the street. It'll have its main entry coming in off the street, which is, you know, a very good positive design feature.
Right, and I also noticed that there's comments that have been made by the Heritage Committee, and I'm curious to know, I think we'd all like to know, what was that process? Because I don't believe that we've seen this before. I viewed it as quite positive. What was the process that you used to engage them? Because they actually had a few important comments about the architecture.
So, Madam Mayor, we engaged one of the top heritage consultants in Southern Ontario to work on this project. And what she was able to do was to listen to the comments from the Heritage Committee, work with the project architect, and we specifically designed these buildings to address those comments and concerns. I'll let Monica or Matt describe what happened at the Heritage Committee meetings, because I wasn't in attendance, but for all intent and purposes, you know, we heard the concerns, we adjusted the concept, and here we are with a positive recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Monica.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, so the Heritage Committee reviewed the original design, had certain comments, and then when the revisions came back, the Heritage Committee reviewed the designs and were supportive of the designs and asked that certain characteristics of the designs be incorporated into the site plan approval process. So staff are aware of these design guidelines from the Heritage Committee and are ready to take those into consideration when this goes through the site plan process.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, a question then to Ms. Kokia. Monica, the color of the brick, in the rendering, it looks very vibrant, and when I look at Woodburn Cottage, it itself, it's a very soft, you know, it's probably become very soft, the coloration over the years. Was that taken into account at all, the compatibility?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, definitely the compatibility with the characteristics of Woodburn Cottage as well as the surrounding historical area was taken into consideration. And typically with the site plan approval process doesn't necessarily go through the Heritage Committee, but in this case it will. And we have many members on the committee that very professional heritage. We have a heritage professional, and they will take all these design aspects into consideration at the site plan approval stage as well.
Right. That was really welcome, in my opinion, in terms of looking, Mr. Chairman, at the direction that council gave at that public meeting. I think that what has come back is really worthwhile. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Kokia.
Thank you, Mary Easton. Next, we have Ms. Kirkland, I believe, Councillor Russell.
Yeah, I just saw Matt had his hand up. I didn't know if he had anything to add before we moved over to tie into Monica's comments. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thanks. I just more or less was going along what Monica was saying, just that, you know, during this process here. I mean, we're getting pretty far into the elevation design, probably a little further than usual, but for good reason here, as you know, there has been some extra considerations we've had to make. But with respect to the actual color of the brick, I think that's something definitely point well taken, and we'll consider that as we get further into detailed design. But staff and the Heritage Committee alike, we're definitely much happier with just the overall design elements and the materials being used, which at this point in the process, I think is paramount. And we will definitely continue to work with them to make sure we get a good, best possible fit into the surroundings. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to Councillor Russell.
Yes, Mary Easton, did you still have your hand up, or are you?
Oh, my apologies. No.
That's okay.
No,
Thanks. We
not,
can.
not at the moment.
Councillor Russell.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to either Matt or Monica. Again, I wasn't able to see the Heritage Committee meeting. Just wondering, what options were they given when they were evaluating this project?
That question goes to
Matt or Monica.
Okay. Monica, I'll let you take it first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so as I said, the Heritage Committee reviewed the original designs, and there was many back and forth between the developer and staff to come up with this design as well. The owner's heritage planner reviewed the new design as well, and support this new design. So as far as options, I mean, the only options that staff and the Heritage Committee were provided were the original option, and then based on our comments and concerns, the revised design.
Mr.
Bruder?
I see your.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, exactly. At this particular, when this whole process happened, really it was the goal of staff and of the process to make sure the Heritage Committee was engaged in the design, not necessarily providing options. It wasn't about necessarily saying a yes or a no. It was an iterative process where there could be some back and forth, some design considerations, because there was other elements too that informed the process. When I think about the cultural heritage evaluation, the professional opinion by the heritage consultant, so that also went into the design as well. But it was more about just making sure the Heritage Committee was up to date, and if they had any input, we definitely considered it as we went through the process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bruder. Through you, Mr. Chair, follow-up. So were they given the option to say no if they so felt? Or was it let's find the best fit for this development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it wasn't really about them saying no or making a decision on it per se. This wasn't necessarily before them. It was more, it's a planning application. We just wanted to make sure that any considerations from the Heritage Committee with respect to the impact assessment, the heritage impact assessment, or the planning process was considered. The actual decision lies with committee of the whole here with respect to the process.
Okay, I believe I have one more follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I was going to ask Ms. Kokiar if she had further comment to what Mr. Bruder said regarding the meeting.
No, I don't have any further comments.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Russell.
Okay, last follow-up through you to our members of the Heritage Committee, Councillor Brunet and Councillor Timmers. Can you give any insight whether or not, if given the option of saying yes or no, the Heritage Committee would give that answer?
Okay, so
Micklek, as a point of order, isn't this supposed to be done under the report section? These are supposed to be questions to the delegates right now, and we're wandering down a path that we shouldn't be.
Okay, I can wait. I withdraw.
I think that we're trying to ask questions to Mr. Arians and Ms. Redfearn regarding their presentation. We'll get to the report itself. Is that okay, Councillor Russell?
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, next we have Councillor Timmers.
Okay, well, I feel maybe I'll reserve my comments until we do get to the report, but I'm quite happy to speak about the process that happened at the Heritage Committee and our role. is not to make a decision one way or the other, Councillor Russell, but let's leave this to the report, and I have some comments there. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, Mr. Bruder, you still have your hand up. I'm thinking that, all right, any other members of council have questions for our delegation? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Arians, Ms. Redfern.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just maybe
yeah.
summarize
Certainly.
quickly. You know, we spent a lot of time discussing heritage, but you know, as land use planners, that is one of the factors that we balance. We have provincial guidelines for intensification. We have King Street, we have access, we have a number of infilling policies that we deal with. And at the end of the day, it's striking an appropriate balance amongst all of these factors. And I think the project before you strikes that balance. It's infilling with a heritage flavor. So thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to completing another exciting project here in Beamsville.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So, Mr. Fraccioni, there's no questions from Mr. Fraccioni as well either. Okay, perfect.
So we're moving to the report now, Councillor?
Yes, there being no further questions of the delegations, we will now consider item 5.3.2, report PD-06-21, zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of vacant condominium. Do members of council have any questions or comments?
And this is to speak to the report.
Correct.
Oh, yeah. We have Councillor Timmers up first.
Councillor Timmers, go ahead.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. This process started many months ago with public consultation that happened. And the Heritage Committee was included from the very beginning with the original plans and drawings. And the applicant and the developer listened to our comments and went back to the drawing board. And we are now currently, the Heritage Committee again revisited the new designs, and we actually supported the motion to support this application. It was supported unanimously at the Heritage Committee. You can see that in the report. Our role is an advisory committee. We advise. We're like a commenting agency. We don't decide yes or no. We advise and we make comments and we make recommendations. And Mr. Fraccioni was kind enough to join us at our Heritage Committee. And we had a very full discussion about the entire application. And you will see in the report as well that the Heritage Committee made some recommendations that will happen during the site plan portion of this application. So in answer to you, Councillor Russell, the Heritage Committee was in support of this application. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Timmers. Who do we have next?
We have Councillor Rajima.
Councillor Rinciama, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've read through the report and listening to everybody, and I'm quite happy to hear that the Heritage Committee had a lot of input and review during the process. And I've asked questions also of planning committee over the last, or of planning staff to clarify what's in the report. So I just want to make sure, I mean, the design, I can see there's a lot of work that's gone into it. And the point is to support the streetscape that we see along King Street. It's got a lot of heritage aspects to it. So I guess I want to know that, you know, what we're doing now, I mean, the current owners that put a lot of work into it, they want to establish this zoning amendment, and with these elevation, and it looks great. But what's our assurance that down the road, if there is a future owner, if it doesn't get built right away, I'm not sure. I'm wondering if somebody can tell me what assurances we have that what we see in that elevation will happen. And further to that, there was a recommendation that's in the minutes of the Heritage Committee on this agenda. They were recommending that a hold be put on it, subject to site plan approval. So I'm wondering if somebody can tell me if they think that's a good idea, if it's necessary, or if what's in place is satisfactory in terms of retaining the heritage flavor of the streetscape in the long run.
Thank you very much, Councillor Njema. Who would you like to direct that question to? Is there a particular, Mr. Bruder, you jump first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Definitely a good question. We did look at that potential for a holding provision. Reason being, in this case, we didn't think it was necessary per se, is this has been a process that we've gone through quite a lot of checks and balances in terms of ensuring that heritage considerations are properly accounted for. Just in zoning alone, I mean, we've had the heritage impact assessment done, or the applicant has rather. The Heritage Committee is, as you heard from Councillor Timmers, had multiple opportunities for to provide their input, and that particular design, the latest renderings were supported by the Heritage Committee. In addition, staff have been working very diligently. We've heard loud and clear what the concerns are, so you can be rest assured as well that no matter who owns the property, when this does go through site plan, we will be looking for the buildings to closely resemble the elevation, subject to, of course, some fine tuning that always occurs during detailed design.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. Councillor Njema, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yourself. Okay, perfect. Who do we have next?
We have Councillor Brunet.
Councillor Brunet, would you like to provide some comments prior to a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Mickelek. So I guess I would just kind of echo Mr. Arian's comments. And as a member of the Heritage Committee, I agree with Councillor Timmers. I'm very happy with where we've landed and the comments that Heritage Committee have made and some of the recommendations and the provisions that we put in. I think have some good teeth, and I think we've done a good job. In relationship to Councillor Rinjema or Councillor Russell's comment, where he was looking for Councillor Timmers and I to comment, my comment would be that my first item would be to point out, which I think is critical, is that the heritage designation is on the cottage, and the cottage for its architectural attributes, not on the lands or on the site. And I think we need to be very cognizant of that as we look at this, that the heritage designation is on the cottage. It's not on the land. We're going to also talk about another report later this evening. I think that's important. I think the other thing is important is that there is a balance. It's a huge balance. You know, when we look at the official plan and the densification of the provincial policy, and it's never easy to make these decisions. But based on the renderings that we work with the applicant and the owner, I think we've landed on a really, really good spot, one that I'm very comfortable with. And I think a lot of that has to do with our chair, Michael Seaman, who comes to our Heritage Committee with a planning lens, but also a heritage lens of working in many municipalities across this province. And I think we're very fortunate to have Michael Seaman on our Heritage Committee to lead us in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunet. I just, you know, interesting point about the heritage designation, whether it's just on the building or the property itself. Can you confirm that, Mr. Bruder, what the councillor has just mentioned? I personally would not have known that myself, not being a professional.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chair, that's correct. So the bylaw does reference the lands, but only as, you know, from a situational standpoint on where the cottage lies, as the heritage designation is registered on the title of the lands. But if you look at the description in the bylaw that for the heritage designation, it's all about the cottage. And it's all about some of the architectural features that are included in the cottage. That's what it hones in on, and that's what it speaks to. So Councillor Brunet is correct.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Who do we have next? Ms. Kirklos?
Councillor Petrieva.
Councillor Petrieva.
Yes, thanks, Chair Michalek. Question to Mr. Bruder through you. With respect to the tree preservation plan, Matt, says a number of trees will be needed to be removed. How many is that? Doesn't say in the report, just says a number.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I actually don't have the exact number in front of me either, but when they say a few, it's not 20 trees. I believe it. It's far less than that. It's only a handful, if I do recall correctly.
Okay, and then the report said too that it would the replacements would be based on the size. So I mean, if we knew which ones were coming out, we'd also know the radius or circumference of the trunk and know what size need to be replaced. So
Yep.
Okay,
that's right. I also would just add too that if it's not possible to replace that particular size exactly, then maybe another option that we look at and is within our tree policy even is there would be multiples.
Yeah, exactly, and that was one of the teeth in that tree bylaw. So I appreciate that. Just one other question too, and again, and I ask this all of the time, because when we have these infills, we know they're going to be contentious, and we know there's going to be pushback. But any thoughts of and consideration of, say, removing one of the units from the south building? Would this help better achieve the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 variances they were seeking? So it might make the lot areas bigger. It would probably push the front setback back to equal it, and the southerly rear, now you're going to reach that setback. Any thought of that? Was there any back and forth?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, certainly we always try to evaluate things like that as we go forward. This was obviously the desire of the applicant to have this many units in there. They didn't want to reduce the unit count. And when we looked at it, some of the variances that are being requested for some of the reductions with respect to the setbacks and whatnot, it's not all that unusual for townhouse developments that we've been seeing. So we didn't feel the need to really pursue it any further than just bringing it up. So that's where that one ended up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Petrieva. Who do we have next?
We have Councillor Russell.
Councillor Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Bruder, just a question as far as resident engagement. I know that the town reached out to the residents within 120 meters of the site. Can you confirm how many residents roughly that notification went out to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact number in front of me. I'm not sure if Monica knows off the top of her head, but we can definitely check that real quick for you, for sure.
Yep, I can check that real quick through you, Mr. Chairman.
Even an approximate would be okay.
Yep,
Too.
I have about 60. 60 residents, yep.
60 homes or 60 residents?
60 property owners within 120 meters.
Okay. Thank you, Monica. Follow up, Mr. Chair. So I do appreciate what the designer and what the developer have put together as far as the facade and the look of it. I think there have been some steady improvements there. My question and concern is the long-term impacts of an approval on this in our downtown core and along an area where we have along King Street on the south side, from basically where this property is until as you're kind of approaching 30 Road. We have a number of these very long extended lots. Again, I would be very concerned, and I think a good majority of our residents would be concerned if these would be turned into townhouse or condo units running perpendicular to King Street. So again, I feel that, again, having only 60 residents engaged on this, I think that's extremely low, because I think this is possibly a precedent setting. I know it's not in a legal sense, but again, we are really setting the tone for what could be happening down the road. And I am greatly concerned about that, because I don't necessarily think that feels or fits the historic feel for what we're trying to achieve. So I'm just wondering if a quick question to Mr. Bruder or to Monica, whether or not we have ever, or even to the Heritage Committee members, if we've ever considered having a heritage contribution or conservation district along that area, just to, again, maintain some of what we've got currently.
Put that to Mr. Bruder first, and if members of the committee would like to speak, either Councillor Timmers or Brunet, I'll allow them. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good question for sure. It is something that we have talked about. It's something we've looked at. I know our CAO and I and a couple members of the committee, Councillor Timmers, Brunet, we've walked a long stretch of King Street there. We've looked at the district. There are a few properties that are on the list of potentially designated heritage properties. So I get the point, but in terms of having, you know, a lot of times when you look at identifying a heritage conservation district, there is really a large continuous theme of said heritage value throughout the entire corridor, and it's contiguous throughout. And here, you know, my opinion is that there's a little bit of fragmentation that happens there. It's kind of pieced here and there. There might be some significant design somewhere, maybe not elsewhere. But the point isn't lost on me that there is some heritage value within the corridor for sure. So, you know, one of the things that I think is incumbent upon staff to look at a little bit further, further to your concern, is to take a look at maybe some policy considerations we could look at for that corridor, and perhaps maybe drill down a little bit on some of the themes that maybe are a little bit more frequently occurring, if we can identify some of those and factor that into how we consider development in the future. So something we definitely can and will look at.
So, Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up on that. Again, maybe the theme is not, it's not a question, I guess. Maybe the theme is not necessarily the design of the buildings. Maybe it's the land itself. Again, being those large lots. Again, if right now the majority, and I would say probably all of them, are zoned for single residential, maybe that in itself is something that we want to protect down the road along that line. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I know Mayor Easton had her hand up. Councillor Brunet, would you like to speak first?
As long as the mayor's okay with it.
She's nodding her head that she's good. So, Councillor,
yeah, so thank you, Chair McPherson.
This conservation area, or this historical district area. Has there ever been any discussion on that?
Yeah. So thank you, Councillor McPherson. And certainly yes. The answer is yes. At our very recent Heritage Committee meeting, it was discussed. There are a number of Heritage Committee members that feel we need to really move forward with some discussions really at light speed, because, you know, as we're discussing this, we already know there's another property that's got a for sale sign on it, 2 houses down. There's another house that's got an application for a demolition permit. So yes, I do believe that we are all very concerned, and many would echo Councillor Russell's comments. And I believe there's a combination of things in play here. You know, we're dealing with outdated bylaws. The bylaw that is speaking to this property is a bylaw from 1998. That's fact. And, you know, we need to ensure as we move along that, you know, that our official plan aligns with, you know, the growth and everything that we want in the community. So there's many moving parts here. But to answer your question, Chair Michalak, yes. You know, Councillor or Chair Seaman and the Heritage Committee members at the last meeting spoke quite extensively, and Monica can speak to it, with regards to next steps about putting budgetary items in, next steps, a long list of what would be involved looking at heritage districts, not only in this area on King Street in Beamsville, but also in the Jordan Village area. So it is top of mind. It is something that I think we need to discuss, not only at Heritage, but at this council as we move forward. I think it needs to be a concern as this community grows and as we look at densification throughout the municipality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brunet. Next, I believe Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there certainly does need to be a heritage district in a number of areas, including Jordan and Vineland. However, resources are considerable, expertise is considerable, and I definitely agree that we should be considering those resources for the urban design elements in the town. It really is very timely. However, a few weeks ago, you may recall that we received a copy of an LPAT hearing. And in that report, the focus on that report was strictly on whether or not the town had complied with the policies of the town. So whatever policies were in place, which are not only our own, but also the regions and the provinces, that was the question. Has the town followed the policies? And in fact, we had adhered to our policies to the letter, and therefore the ruling was against the complainant. And so in this situation, what we're looking at is current policy. And to have, we sent the staff away with the developer with the current policy in mind, which in the report says that we are fully compliant with it, with an expectation that there would be reworking of the design on a number of matters. And from the comments that we've received tonight, I would judge, and I think correctly, that conversation gleaned us exactly what we wanted. We wanted a construction and architecture that was compatible with that place. We have that. Yes, I agree that there are issues with these very long properties. And so we probably do need to have a look at that. However, they are compliant with current provincial policy. And so if the best that we can achieve is to ensure that the face front, the piece that's on the main street, is the area that we're going to look to for compatibility from a historical and architectural perspective, we have achieved that with these renderings and with this plan. Now, if we want to do something in the future, we do need to get on with it. But when the question comes up, the resources need to be available. Furthermore, I want to echo Councillor Brunet's comments, because we do have another piece of property coming up, exactly the same kind of a configuration, very long. And, the question is, do we want a 4-story apartment on that building? Or do we want to have the kind of discussion that took place on this property? I would say, from what I've heard tonight, that that's the kind of compatibility and discussion we're looking for. I'm not giving the developers any accolades, but I think that any situation, Mr. Chairman, where we can come together, where we have a mutual understanding of goals, and we can reach those goals to the betterment of the community until we have the Heritage District, until we change our policies, that's a good place to be. So I believe that we have, in many ways, achieved, and I just want to make sure I ask a question so I'm not breaking the rules. And so I would like, Mr. Chairman, through you, to check with Mr. Bruder about the efficacy of the discussions that took place and whether or not, in his opinion, that the process responded to the public comments and the committee directions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bruder.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think in this case, most definitely it did. I mean, we started off in a completely different, well, not the land use in terms of the built forms relatively similar to where we started, but there has been a lot of design considerations revisited, input received, like I said, from the Heritage Committee, input received, during the public meeting too, from some members of council. And we've been able to go back and forth and come up with a product that, in my opinion, is much more refined and is a much better fit. We've now got a unit properly facing King Street too, so you've got that maintenance of that road corridor there from the street in terms of keeping that compatible land use look to it. I would note generally too, this isn't lost on staff. We've had other interests in some other properties. Councillor Russell, like you suggested, some of them are conducive to being maybe more utilized. They're larger lots. We've had some developers come forward with plans for a built form that, yes, it looked great, but it wasn't compatible. It was a very modern and contemporary apartment style building, and staff went back and said, no, that's not going to fit here. So there's already that level of back and forth happening too, as staff are very aware through Monica's involvement in the Heritage Committee and just generally from what we hear and consider in the corridor, that we're definitely taking those strides as well as we look at concepts that are brought forward. So we are trying to inform concepts before they even get to the point where we'd be comfortable bringing them forward. So there is that layer as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bruder.
Perhaps I see our CAO, Mike Kakopoulos, has his hand up. Would you like to provide further comment?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could, and not, I think, specifically to this particular application, but listening to the comments that I think we're hearing tonight, I just want to make a few comments and speak about something that staff have spoken about, and that is an infill bylaw. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm going to make a comment and suggest that this isn't about being pro or anti-development, but it's about some of the guiding principles I think we need across our community. And a lot of communities have gone through this, whether they be small or large communities, whether they be places like Ottawa, who we've looked at some of their bylaws. But we need to give everybody a level of comfort with the process on all sides of this. So I'm going to suggest that moving forward, staff explore an infill bylaw that really lays out criteria on how some of these things would move forward. So those are my comments, Councillor. But again, through you, Chair, to all of Council, not per se to this particular application, but some comments about how we move forward.
Thank you very much. I don't see any hands up anymore.
We have Councillor Russell.
Councillor Russell. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just one more question.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's important. Go ahead.
Through you to Mr. Bruder, of the public comments you got back during the virtual open house, what percentage were, again, roughly, if you could give me an approximate, what percentage were for and against?
I'll go ahead, Mr. Chair. So there was a very small amount of comments, most of which are just, there was a member of the Heritage Committee at the time who provided some commentary on the design and fit. But really, we didn't get a lot of input from the circulation, next to none, as a matter of fact. And we didn't even get any from the immediate property owner on the west side. So comments were very minimal, and we didn't get anything that was, negative in terms of, this shouldn't happen. We didn't get any comments at all. Nothing happened during the open house in advance of the public meeting. So there was not a lot of commentary provided throughout the process by the surrounding residents. At least that was submitted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bruder. Again, just one quick follow-up to your points. Again, I believe the resident on the west side, again, they just sold to a new family that's moving, and actually I spoke with the family member today who is moving in March 1st, and they are, again, devastated that this is happening next to them. I don't think they were provided any opportunity to provide commentary, again, that would have resided with the current owner. But again, it just goes back to the point of trying to increase the overall outreach to our community beyond maybe just that minimum 120 meter setback that we're looking at right now. Just a point.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question with regards to public notification. Is it 60 people, 60 residents, or is it 60 civic addresses?
It would be the 60 properties addresses, Councillor.
60, okay, so 60 addresses, 60 civic addresses. Okay, perfect, thank you. Kathleen, Ms. Dale, you have your hand up, I see. Quickly, I'll let you, would you like to speak further to?
So, Mr. Chairman, the other thing that we're looking at with communication staff is ways that we can supplement our public notices. So right now, we follow the Planning Act requirements. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. But we are actually looking at finding ways to supplement it so that we get the word out. So it's a work in progress with communication staff.
Thank you very much. Mayor Easton, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, from what we have heard this evening, And certainly in response to Ms. Dale's comments, Ms. Dale, would you say that there has been full compliance with the Planning Act in terms of the notifications that were given? Have we limited ourselves according to the Act?
Ms. Dale.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the Planning Act requirements are the minimum requirements. So they basically say you have to notify all owners of property within a certain radius. So those are the minimum requirements. One of the things that the town does in addition right now is, is we also do open houses in addition to the public meeting so that we can get some comments prior to the public meeting. But what we're looking at with communication staff is some additional areas, some additional methods of communication so that we can better get the word out with some of the proposed planning applications and changes that are going on.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. And then once we've established that we have been fully compliant with all of our policy matters, how much effort is made then to work with the adjacent neighbors who are the most impacted in the case of any kind of development around mitigation measures? What do we do about that?
Ms. Dale?
So, Mr. Chairman, as part of any application that's subject to site plan approval, if at the zoning stage there has been input from the public, like they may say, we'd like to see some trees or we want a fence, what we do as part of site plan approval is there is some consultation with those adjacent property owners. So we will look at ways that we can mitigate things through site plan approval. It might be, some trees, some fencing, some landscaping, those types of things. So those are done through the subsequent site plan approval process.
All right, and Mr. Chairman, I noticed in the report that there's quite an extensive tree buffer that's been suggested. Can you describe to us just exactly what that will entail?
Would that be best to Mr. Bruder, perhaps?
Whomever you decide, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'll just I'll defer that to Monica. I think she was dealing a little bit with that. Perhaps she might have a comment to offer.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Monica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so there will be cleaning up of the landscaping as well. There'll be additional landscaping to buffer the development and Woodburn Cottage. And a lot of the landscaping will be enhanced as well. And this will all take place during the site plan approval stage.
Okay, that's great. And so, I mean, that is definitely, there's no question there's progress. I do remember the questions about that buffer being asked at the public meeting. Mr. Chairman, we follow processes at the appropriate time. I believe that's what we were doing here. I feel quite relieved at the discussions that have taken place, and the staff have really guided those on all of our behalf, including everyone who lives on the street. The planning policy certainly would not permit us to disregard the application, and the closest that we can get, and I think we're getting closer all the time. I think this is an excellent example, a good model to show future developers around infill, is really to have this kind of discussion and for a state of reasonableness to prevail. So I was very pleased to see the outcome of this, and I can only hope, along with my colleagues, that we will continue to improve it. Thank you very much, and thanks very much to the staff for the work that they did, and also to the Arians group.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. I don't see any hands up.
There's no other hands.
Okay, terrific. I think it's an interesting development process. I feel comfortable with how the process went along from the initial conceptual drawings that we saw to what we have now. I think it's tricky when you're dealing with provincial policy on infill and what can or can't be done. I like what I'm hearing with regards to the Jordan Historical Committee or the Lincoln Historical Committee, that they're working on this and have acknowledged it and are going to be addressing it. As far as development along King Street, I mean, I asked myself, is it better to, with this development, have 2 or 3 additional driveways fronting King Street, or 1 driveway servicing 4 homes? Is that a safety? Does that help with safety? I'm not a planner, I'm not a technician, but I leave that up to our experts to determine that. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunet. Council approves zoning bylaw amendment application PLZ BA 201-901-192 in the name of FBF Ontario Inc. Council approved draft plan of vacant land of condominium application PLC VL 201-901-96 in the name of FBF Ontario Inc. in accordance with the plan outlined in Appendix A and in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Condominium Act and regulations thereunder, subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix D. That all parties be advised of Council's decision of the draft plan of condominium application in accordance with provincial regulations. The Director of Planning and Development endorse and the draft plan as approved 20 days after notice of Council's decision has been given, provided that no appeals against the decision have been lodged. That the applicant be advised that draft approval of this plan will lapse 3 years from the date of draft approval unless an extension of the approval period is granted. If an extension is requested, an updated review and revisions to the conditions of the draft approval may be necessary at that time. The final elevations for the dwellings be substantially in conformance the elevations in Appendix B. Council enact and pass zoning bylaw attached as Appendix C of this report to amend the zoning regulations for lands described as part of Lot 174, Corporation Plan 3 in Beamsville. Council deem the zoning bylaw conforms with the official plan for the town of Lincoln. I will now ask our clerk to call the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Councillor Mcpherson.
Yes.
Councillor Micklef,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
No.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
and that carries.
Moving on, the clerk will now remove Councillor Rajima and Reimer from the meeting during the following discussion with respect to PD-08-21, as they have declared an interest earlier and will not participate. Have they been removed?
I've just removed them right now.
Perfect. Okay, our 4th delegation is Mike Ecker on behalf of Vineland Growers, speaking to PD-08-21 zoning bylaw amendment application by Vineland Growers Co-op Limited. I'm not aware if, I don't know if Mike Ecker has any comments to make, but should any members of council have any questions for him, please feel free to ask.
Councillor McCluck, I don't have a presentation, we're just here for questions.
Yep, thank you very much. Do any members of council have any questions for Mr. Eckert with regards to this zoning bylaw amendment? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Eckert, for attending. Our 5th delegation is Heather Sewell on behalf of MPG Planning Solutions, speaking to PD-08-21 zoning bylaw amendment application by Vineland Growers Co-op Limited. Heather, welcome. Are you there?
Hello, good evening. Yes, Thank you, Chair.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, Mayor, members of council and staff. My name is Heather Sewell and I am a planner with NPG Solutions, Planning Solutions, representing Vineland growers on the zoning bylaw amendment application before you. I have reviewed the report and agree with staff's recommendations, and at this time I have nothing to add. And as Mike Ecker already mentioned, we are both available to answer any questions that the committee may have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Do any members of council have any questions? Seeing, I don't see any. All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Heather, for attending. There being no further questions of the delegations, we will now consider item 5.33, Port PD-08-21, zoning bylaw amendment application by Vineland Growers Co-op Limited. Do members of council have any questions or comments?
We have Councillor Mcpherson up first.
Councillor Mcpherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick comment, just wanted to commend the two parties involved here on getting together and working through the challenges that were presented during the public meeting. I think the two groups certainly went a long way to bridge an agreement that we are sitting in front of tonight. I would also like to commend the staff in bringing this forward as quickly as we possibly could bring it forward. I know the timing is very important here, and I think you did a great job in moving this to the first available agenda. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I see Mayor Easton's hand is up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also want to reinforce this component of the process, which works from the base policy, but provides as much latitude as required with the adjacent property owners to have their concerns raised and to have mitigation measures brought forward. This is a role that we all understand is played more and more by the town staff, and they do a very good job. And it is the voice that the public have that prevents them from having to spend a lot of money on lawyers. When we now know what the position of the LPAT hearings are, and they focus on policy alone, and these measures that have been mitigated through this process are completely separate. So I want to thank everyone for their ability to come together and demonstrate how well the process works. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate those comments. I don't see any other hands up. I'd like to commend staff as well on their handling of this significant application. It's I think it's important to do what we can, you know, to retain this industry that's been within our community for many years. I echo Councillor Mcpherson's comments, and I think he did a fabulous job summing them up. So that being said, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva. Council approves zoning bylaw amendment application PLZ BA 202000075 in the name of Vineland Growers Cooperative Limited. Council enact and pass zoning bylaw attached as Appendix C of Report PD-08-21 to amend the zoning regulations for the subject lands. Council deem that zoning bylaw conforms to the official plan for the town of Lincoln. I will call the clerk to call the vote.
Councillor Brunei,
Yes.
Councillor Mcpherson,
Yes.
Councillor Miclick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer. Sorry, he's declared an interest. My apologies. And Councillor Rajima has as well. Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Support.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
and that carries.
Thank you very much. The clerk will now reinstate both Councillor Rajima and Reimer to the meeting.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Take care. Thank you for attending. Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Our sixth delegation is Karen Hodgins on behalf of herself speaking to PD-04-21, zoning bylaw amendment application by Dennis and Karen Hodgins. Karen, are you there?
Karen, can you hear us? Karen, can you hear?
My microphone is showing, that's right.
Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Hi there, Karen.
We'll try to connect one more time. Karen, can you hear us?
Can't hear them.
You can't hear us, Karen? We can hear you.
How do you know if they can hear you? Okay, so I'm good, right? Am I good?
You're good. We can hear you.
It says Karen Hodgins. It says they can hear me. Yay. They can hear you.
Okay.
Chair, did you want to try it? Did you want to try one more time? Karen, if you're watching YouTube or if you have it on, it could be a delay. Did you want to turn that off?
We can hear you.
I think first YouTube meetings are tricky. I think they can be tricky. So let's give your patience, members of council and staff.
So I'll message Karen. Just give me one moment so that we can. Chair, we can disconnect and try to have her reconnect if you like. Karen, can you please unmute yourself? Or maybe call a slight break, Chair Miclick, while we try to connect Karen?
Yeah, how about we take a 5-minute break? How does that sound?